Joining us in the Sandbox today, we are boldly navigating into the Metaverse with Sharon Joseph. Just ahead. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Prolifics Innovation Sandbox. I'm your host, Greg Hodgkinson.
Hello.
If you're new to the show, we're into our third series, so keep an eye on our series calendar, as every month we'll be hosting different technology experts who are leaders in their fields. They'll share their passion and what they see being the future of hot technologies in data, AI, cloud, and so much more. Your voice is an important part of the show, so please submit your questions at any time in the live chat, either just to the right or below the video feed. And don't forget to stick around towards the end for Q&A. Okay, so let's meet our guests today. So today I'm joined by Metaverse expert Sharon Joseph, who is founder and CEO of Croasis, a data company that's been helping clients take their first steps into the Metaverse. Sharon is a thought leader at the intersection of technology, statistics, and strategy. Her stated goal is not to tell you what you're doing right, but rather to tell you what you need to know to outperform the competition, if I got that right, Sharon. And Sharon, a warm welcome to the Innovation Sandbox.
Thank you, Greg. It's great to be here.
All right, excellent. So we'll start with an easy question, right? What is the Metaverse? Is it more like the Matrix or is it more like Minecraft? And before you answer that, we actually did a poll of our audience in advance of the show. We asked our audience, what is the first thing you think of when someone says the Metaverse? So 9% said cryptocurrency, 14% said NFTs, 19% said gaming, so Minecraft and Roblox, and then 59% said virtual reality and augmented reality. So it's interesting to hear what our audience thinks, but I'd like to start with you, Sharon. What is your simple definition of what the Metaverse actually is?
Sure. First thing I'll say is I'm not going to steal the definition from anyone, Greg, because the Metaverse was defined actually in a science fiction book called Snow Crash, and it was published in 1992. And obviously, a lot of things we see in technology comes from science fiction or thought leaders. And so if you think back to 1992, which seems like eternity ago for a lot of us, this is where the first term came from. All those things that were listed, and thank you for doing that poll, because it sounds like most people are thinking virtual reality and augmented reality. And technically, the Metaverse includes all those things that you polled on. So it's good to hear that everybody started picking one of them and saying, hey, this is what my choice is. When I think of this concept of Metaverse, I'm thinking about this mergence of your real world to a digital world. And I like to keep it super simple because technically, you're still living in this virtual world. You don't need to have VR glasses to do that because there are two-dimensional aspects. And I'll give two examples. One is I did a conference where I was on a panel. And at that conference, we just logged in on our desktop. And then we went into kind of a two-dimensional world together. And we were speakers in an auditorium. And so that's an example, a very simple way that you could be in a virtual world. The second example is actually going into Meta's Horizon Worlds. So I was given an orientation of that. We had to go in, and when you're in there, you're wearing your VR glasses. So we were wearing the Oculus Quest 2. And in that, you're going in and actually immersing yourself in a world with other people as well. So I also never like to think that we're doing this on our own because you want to go in and interact with other people. And that's also part of what I think the Metaverse is building community within this digital landscape. I love that poll, though.
Yeah, so it's some sort of experience that you immerse yourself into, but it's a shared digital experience with others. So it's kind of a social digital experience that you can kind of do things in and interact in. So that's very good. So when also looking at what some of the experts are saying, they say right now, and actually you and I were talking about this just before the show started, we're kind of in a period now which is similar to when just before the internet first started taking off. So the experts call this the pre-metaverse, or they talk about pre-metaverse experiences. So things like Roblox and maybe, I don't know, even Minecraft, even maybe a little bit, and some of those other experiences, augmented reality, they're all different pre-metaverse experiences because the metaverse itself hasn't really taken off. So we'll get there. We'll look at what that looks like when it takes off. But does that make sense? I mean, again, with the World Wide Web, when it first started taking off, that was really what made the internet relevant to all of us. Before that, it was just a network that maybe a bunch of super nerdy geeks like ourselves would have been into. But for the average person on the street, they didn't really appreciate what this would become and how it would be relevant to their lives. So does that make sense to you, this kind of pre-metaverse period we're in?
Yeah. So I look at things on a continuum. I think about it when it comes to AI, data, all those things. So whenever I'm looking at a category, and metaverse is obviously a category, I think of the number of users. So right now, I think it's approximately, the last number I saw was about 50,000 users in these virtual worlds. And if you compare that back to the internet, and this is what we were talking about before the show, you can think about that in the early 80s, sort of between 1980 to 1984, where you had, the number of people who had a computer was around 87,000 households in the US. And so in that area, you're at the point of just innovators or early adopters. And there's a great book that I always recommend, which is called Crossing the Chasm. And it talks about technology and businesses and what it takes to go from, hey, I'm an early adopter and innovator, to I'm actually mainstream. And if you think about the number of users now on the World Wide Web or the internet, it's 5.4 billion people. And so when in the context of where we are, we're in a very early stage, which is very exciting, Greg. I mean, you said it. We're the geeky ones who are saying, how can I start exploring this space or be somebody who is a thought leader? And right now is the best time to get into this space because everything is new. Everybody's looking at it as an exploration, but it is something that you have to pick up on pretty quick, because things change so quickly, right? What we think right now might be the best world to invest in when it comes to a virtual world might completely be something different, right? So we think about entering these worlds with businesses like Sandbox or Decentraland, and you're kind of saying, is this someplace that I should have my brand? Is this something that's going to be there long term? And so those are tough decisions for businesses right now. But as I said, I think it's a really exciting time when you have so few users and such a low penetration in terms of households.
So maybe just for those folks that are not familiar with Sandbox and Decentraland, could you quickly just maybe use those two as an example, just give a little bit of a background on what they are and what they're doing?
Yeah, I'm going to go big picture for virtual worlds. Yeah. I think it's a good thing to I'm not even going to use specific examples, but think of it in the context of even how I got into this. One of the biggest hurdles that you have to jump through when you're getting into a virtual world is the understanding that things need to be purchased with cryptocurrency. And so a lot of us would have said 5 years ago, oh, I'm not going to get into cryptocurrency. The issue is that in this specific space, you do have to get into it. And the reason is because everything's purchased in these worlds using crypto. And so if we use a virtual world, so any virtual world, you need to be able to either put something together to be in that virtual world. And when I say put something together, you need to have created an avatar, for example, to go in. And then that would be an example of Horizon Worlds. So I think we all heard that Meta, obviously from Facebook, repositioned the company to Meta and created this concept of Horizon Worlds. Well, if you're going to go and participate in Horizon Worlds, you right now can be in there. And Greg, I don't know if you've had a chance. We can always do this on another show, or you and I could spend some time.
I think so.
I want to take you through an orientation. You go in, but right now you only have the upper part of your body, your arms, your head, but you have no legs or feet. So you're walking around these virtual worlds in a torso, and in that space, if you think of when we were saying Decentraland and Sandbox, I wanted to give Horizon Worlds because it's a very big one that's spending a lot of money behind it and a lot of emphasis. The concept is you can go in and explore right now, but what would you do in there, right? From a business perspective? Well, you're now able to bring your teams in there and host meetings. You're now able to, on your avatar, which you've created, purchase items for that avatar. So one of the big things I saw recently was they took us on a sneak peek of a fashion show where you actually were given items to try on. And so that's one example of a virtual world. And if you look at the Decentraland and the Sandboxes, in that space, a lot of times it's around real estate purchase. And we saw that, a lot of real estate people saw in the headlines how much real estate was going for. And then a lot of people question, why are you purchasing real estate in this space? And for businesses, it was to be able to own something that would potentially get a lot of traffic and then be able to use that property, because similar like the real world, you can do anything you want with that property. You could host things, you could publish things. So those are two kind of examples of virtual worlds, but it's a very interesting space. And I think there's still more to come. So early days on that as well.
And it's good to hear a little bit about those two examples, because, going back to the example of the internet, the internet, if you just looked at the internet as Google, right? If your only experience of the internet was Google, you'd think, right, the internet is a search browser, right? It's a place I can go to find information. But we know the internet is way more than that. So I guess the concept of the metaverse is actually, it's not one of these things. It's not Decentraland or, any of these other single metaverse experiences, but it's the infrastructure and the kind of backbone and the ideas that are pulling all these things together as a set of experiences.
Yeah. To that point, Greg, one of the big things that pushed us into this concept of metaverse was the military and training. And a lot of times industries or new technology emerges because there's a need, and all of a sudden it starts to become something that's acquired by mainstream individuals. And training, you can't actually always train someone on a simulation on just a two-dimensional computer. So the metaverse was created to help on the if you think about big aviation equipment or big military equipment, or having to be able to train someone on how to navigate through these, like actually use a simulation, moving to a three-dimensional and a virtual world gave a more realistic perspective of what someone would go through jumping into the real world, if that makes sense. And so that was a big adoption period in terms of then you can see so many other business cases as well.
So we've seen, and for quite a while, we've had these sort of immersive experiences. So maybe flight simulators going back quite a way. Flight simulators have been around for a while. That is an immersive experience. But I guess what makes the metaverse difference is we're now seeing immersive experiences where people can collaborate and come together. And that's really the thing that makes, that goes from being just a 3D experience to a metaverse experience is firstly, people collaborating in real time together. And then secondly, the fact that there's money to be made. So again, flight simulators and that are interesting, but the reason the metaverse is getting so much press right now is people are cottoning on to the idea that, well, okay, if people are going to be spending time immersed in these experiences, then there's definitely ways to make money out of this. And I guess I would like to start talking a little bit about maybe what some of these business opportunities are in the metaverse. Now, you've worked with a number of clients creating these early metaverse experiences. What sorts of business opportunities are you seeing them exploit? Can you give us some examples?
Yeah, sure. And the first thing I'd say, Greg, is why my personal interest in it. So I'm always a trend. I stay on top of trends, and I have done that. I got into data science a while ago before companies. I worked in consumer brands and marketing. And then I saw this concept of metaverse starting to emerge from, to your point, an opportunity, a business opportunity. And I look at it also from a lifestyle perspective. So for me, it's around consumers and what are they going to adopt and why would they adopt it? And we all know that over the last 3 years, there was this huge need to be more digitally transformed and more digitally savvy. And that led to things like healthcare, for example, as a perfect example, right? Where you no longer wanted to go in person and talk to your doctor, but you wanted to have this opportunity to have a telehealth call, right? Because we weren't going to have in-person interaction. Well, that also led to training and development on, actually doing and practicing surgery through technology. And so when I think about big areas, and I'll talk about some examples that I work on, but big areas that emerge quickly in this space, one would be healthcare. And it's just an amount of, we all saw the past few years, the immense burden we have on our healthcare systems in every country and the need to be able to technologically advance that. And I think that this concept of metaverse, the training and development within the context of it, and just like the huge opportunity to collaborate is probably one of the biggest examples.
Now, interesting, just on that point, because I was looking at a few of the different industries, and CVS Health have said they want to be the first pharmacy in the metaverse. So big businesses in healthcare are definitely looking at what the metaverse means to them.
Yeah, and I'd say you for me also, I saw consulting. So the consulting companies, I know Accenture has gone in heavily into this space. So they actually train and develop all of their employees. And I think their CEO actually made it one of their number one top priorities to be able to get into this space. And you can see it across what the business is doing. So they ordered 150,000 Oculus. Anyone who comes into the company has to go through training and development through that. And so it's a really big bet, but it's showing you that it's not just small companies or smaller brands, et cetera, that are starting this. It's actually the leading companies worldwide. So JP Morgan also created, a desktop experience with regard to a metaverse where you go into their retail space, and they're really leaning into it. And then you think about all the large clothing brands. And so that was an interesting one. I think fashion retail needed to be advanced technologically. All the concept of sustainability as well. And there's still big questions on what sustainability impact the metaverse has, because you have a lot of energy being absorbed, et cetera. So I won't go into that because that'll take us down a really big tangent, Greg, but for another conversation, because it's a big thing that I'm aware of and I talk about as well. So from a brand perspective,
just on fashion, and I just wanted to pause quickly because I know that Ralph Lauren, I was looking, and they'd created a winterscape holiday themed and branded world in Roblox, and they featured their polo sports looks, and that brought a 58% increase in new digital customer acquisition. So I mean, that is a very real result from an early kind of step into the metaverse.
Yeah, and the question is really around how are you converting customers, right? So if they use your physical product, when they go into this area of digital, what do you want that objective for you? And a lot of it could be around the younger demographic and consumers. So Gen Zs, what are they in? Well, they're going to be more apt to be in this technology and moving quickly to be able to adopt it. So brands are looking at their long-term planning and saying, how do I engage with this particular consumer, and how do I build a community? And we all know if you're building the community, it's actually the community that should build itself. And so we saw that with Web 2.0, right? So Web 2.0 was all about social communities and, this whole concept of sharing knowledge. And now we're in Web 3, which is all about the creator economy. And so it's allowing the creators to give access to others. And it's a very interesting time from a business perspective because anyone can have access. Now, the thing I'd say is that a big in other people's minds is the fact that you still need access, right? If you don't have the access to this kind of technology, then you can't actually operate. From a brand perspective too, I'll just talk about one brand that I'm working with. They're looking at how do they build this community, but they also want to say, I don't want to be just a brand. I actually want to be a lifestyle kind of consumer brand. And so they want to be able to engage with their customer in a very different way. And doing this requires them, for example, to offer an NFT on a product that might never come out in the real world. And a big insight, Greg, was in the real world, we want things that are a little more conservative and traditional. And, that's not everyone, but that's the norm. If you're going to purchase something, you want to buy something that is going to last a long time. In a digital world, you can be a lot crazier. So, Greg, I could see you saying, hey, I'm going to go for that leopard print hat, or, hey, I'm going to jazz up and do this plaid jacket that I wouldn't normally wear out, right? So, and that's what you can do in the digital world is create this persona of somebody who you want to make it a little more savvy and more technologically advanced, and you wouldn't get a chance to do that in the real world because you'd say it's only going to last me so long.
Yeah, so I think everyone, or most of the folks out there, or everyone that has kids of a certain age will be able to relate to a certain gaming platform where you're spending a not insignificant amount of money buying outfits for your kids to wear in the game, and that is making a lot of money for that platform, and is a very viable economy. I mean, and it has a whole set of, as you say, creators behind it. So they have creators that are then creating the digital content that are then being surfaced. So it's a whole new ecosystem, a whole new economy that's springing up. Loads of new opportunities.
Yeah, I think creators as well. If you think about it, initially, if you created something and you sold it once, then you would never get any additional benefits, right? Or any additional cash from that, revenue, et cetera. And now with this creator economy, the concept is you'd have a lifetime ability to create something and continually get. And from a creator, it might not only be the monetary aspect, but around just having the clout of knowing that you built something. And I think that a lot of creators didn't have that access before. And then to your point with regard to, having to purchase all these items in these digital worlds for the consumer. So maybe that your, child or your, anyone buying stuff in this space, it gives them a chance to be somebody else than who they are. And so it opens them up to an area that potentially evolves their personality and enables them to be a little more creative as well. So it's interesting to hear, like, we're talking a lot about the pros, by the way, which I'll always talk about those first. And there are a lot
there's definitely two sides to the story.
Yeah.
And we find that with the internet, right? The internet has so many advantages, but there's always, there's certain risks and pitfalls, and that is also a whole area we could get into, which we won't have time for in today's show, which is regulating the metaverse. So let's not even try and unpack that for right now. But as an example, you were talking about, kids being in these experiences and getting to experience things that they otherwise might not get to experience. This is not quite a metaverse story, but I know for a fact my kids have been playing games where they're actually immersed in New York City, right? So it's a cartoon version of New York City. My children have never been to New York City. I get the idea that one day they'll step foot into New York and they'll get this very eerie feeling of having been there before, because they have, in a sense. I mean, they've spent considerable amount of time playing these games in these environments. And again, that's kind of, we're talking pre-metaverse now. Let's ramp that up to 11 and say in the future, we're in the metaverse. And I don't know if it's a virtual reality headsets, or we're stepping into a hollow booth, or whatever it's going to be in the future. It's going to be immersive, but will allow you a freedom of experience that's, I guess, we don't get today with just the internet. Internet is, you get 3 dimensionals, but it's mostly 2-dimensional, and you're interacting with things. It's going to be much more than that.
Yeah, I mean, when we talked about, I forgot to mention, when we talked about Decentraland and Sandbox, right now you can enter on your desktop, right? So you're purchasing things, and it's very easy for you to navigate on your desktop without VR glasses. When we talk about what you're saying as well, and building on that, when you go into Horizon Worlds, you could actually go with your entire family. And to your point, in the future, your entire family could have a preview of New York before you go there, just to say, okay, guys, let's get a lay of the land and understand what we're going to go see before we go there. Or somebody might not ever get the chance to go there, and so they can actually go and experience it, through something.
I will say my kids, from the games they're playing, will expect there to be a hot dog vendor on every corner.
There's a vendor on every corner. I don't know if they're just hot dog vendors. We have a lot of shawarma now and all these other things. So I have to say, it's very, you'll find something, pretzels, peanuts. There's definitely going to be food on every corner. So if they definitely see that in there, then they will have that in reality as well.
So it's about, so the metaverse is creating these very immersive experiences. It's about so the reason you'll want to stay there is because it is engaging, and also you can engage with other people. And as we know, any digital experience is more engaging when it's a shared experience with others. And definitely there's going to be ways to not only be able to experience things that you might buy offline, but also you can buy things in the digital world. So I guess another example I want to talk about briefly is Second Life. So this notion of buying property in the metaverse, I think is something that, when these stories first came out, many folks thought this was some kind of madness, that you would spend, not small amounts of money either, so hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars buying a piece of real estate in Second Life. What's going on there? Can you help kind of unpack that a bit for us?
Yeah, I think when you're, what real estate kind of was one of the biggest things that started this concept of getting excitement. I think the last few years we've all, and I'm sorry, I should go back one though. NFTs are really what started the concept of owning something digital, right? And a lot of companies will think to go into, there's top ideas right now, Greg, that a company will be like, oh, well, should we do this? And one of the things I'd say is it's the concept of an ecosystem. So never think of them in isolation about real estate or an NFT or a digital avatar. A lot of businesses are stepping back and saying, how does this ecosystem contribute back to what I'm trying to build in the real world? And then how would that build into a digital world? And so the whole concept of these spaces like Second Life and buying property was for companies to start exploring. And it was the first foray into getting something in a virtual world and then beginning to test. And so we have storefronts, etc. Yeah.
So the interesting thing on that is that implies there's a location.
Yes.
In the metaverse, so that's important. There's a location, and that location comes at a premium in some cases. And that also then speaks to this kind of 3D notion of people moving around in the metaverse and congregating in locations. And going back to the gaming example, my sons have attended concerts, virtual concerts in the metaverse, which is, again, it's people being congregated in a location in the metaverse for a shared experience. And there's so many different examples that you can think of just from that example in terms of how it can be used in the future. Now, Sharon, I don't know how, but the last 30 minutes have gone pretty quickly. Of course. And we're going to, we saved some time with our audience. So I've really enjoyed the journey so far, but we're going to open it up to the audience and see if there are any questions that they have on what we've been talking about. As a reminder to the audience, if you want to submit your questions in the live chat, it's on the bottom or the right of the video feed, and my producer will hand them over. So let's take a quick look to see kind of what questions are coming through. So we actually have this is an observation more than a question. We did start running a second poll on the metaverse. I don't have all of the answers in front of me, but the leading answer that folks were selecting in that poll in terms of business usage in the metaverse is showcasing physical products. So I guess we spoke a bit about the showcasing of physical products and that being a big business opportunity in the metaverse. So we've covered some of that ground. Okay, another question's come through. What businesses today can best benefit? Let me just see if I can bring that up again. So the other thought that occurs to me, we should be doing this in the metaverse. So definitely that's a second show. That's the next show. So what businesses today can best benefit from the metaverse and how? Someone commented healthcare and education. So can we talk about within healthcare and education, what are some of those benefits that businesses can get?
Sure.
Any examples you know of?
Yeah, I think education is a great one because, if you think about over the last 3 years, how education had to change because it hadn't been digitally transformed. And, I think of just the concept of having young kids and that their attention span's so low and having to teach on a Zoom meeting. I think anyone who has children would say, wow, I wish we had a better way of handling that because they would only have a few minutes even of just an attention on something on a screen. Well, if you actually had a more immersive experience where you're sitting in a classroom together and you're able to potentially pass around an object or through science class do experiments together, then you're thinking about, well, how could this evolve the classroom? And also just being able to share experiences such as like going and traveling somewhere. If you're studying about history, well, what better way than to actually go to the pyramids as a classroom?
Amazing.
Right? We would all have a different experience in terms of travel if we had gone through that. Yeah. From a healthcare perspective, I think there were, we talked about telehealth and how that's evolved. The training, a lot of examples are on actual training of doctors through an immersive experience. So especially through surgeries, having to practice, going through classroom settings in that context the same way. And so I think healthcare will be one of the ones that will, if you think about, evolution of some industries and the fact that they just needed to get further advanced, it's really exciting time for them.
Well, actually, on that example, just to jump into it on healthcare, so you talk about learning how to perform an operation. Now, again, simulations have been around for ages, simulating something like that. But I guess what would almost elevate that towards more of a metaverse experience would be there's not just one person performing the operation. There's a whole team of doctors and nurses, and they could all together experience the operation and learn from it in real time. And that's what differs a kind of metaverse version of that experience from maybe things that have existed in the past.
And also the fact that you're actually using your hands. So in a very metaverse experience, you could be standing up at an operating table that is a virtual operating table. And to your point, you have other people interacting and helping you with this whole procedure. And you, as the physician, going through that procedure and then being able to talk through it as you're going, and even sharing some of that without, traditional ways of going through that. So I think it's a really interesting way of being able to, go back and say, hey, let's look at this again, where you can't do that in a normal setting normally. So, and even with the simulator, for sure, you're going to experience it, but a simulator, you're still on a traditional kind of desktop computer. Well, now you'd actually feel like, oh, I'm moving around. And anyone who's actually had a dinosaur chasing after them in some of these virtual worlds, everybody's ducking. They always laugh at their colleagues when they go through it, because they're like, oh, my friends and my colleagues and my family were like ducking as if there's a real dinosaur. It's because you actually feel like there's this real pterodactyl coming after you. And so there's this concept of losing time in the digital world as well. And I think that's something, everybody's so in tune with it together, and all of a sudden you lose track of time. And these are all interesting things to also explore.
Yeah. So we're going to need to start wrapping. There's one other question I just want to very quickly call out. So as a financial advisory firm, what realistically can we do with Metaverse, and how long would it take to be experienced in the space? So I guess that's interesting, because the question is, how long would it take for them to be experienced in using a Metaverse kind of space? Any kind of thoughts on that?
So I think one thing, and I had this happen to me when I went on the panel for the first time. I think that was, last year, we had to jump in a couple times together as a group into the Metaverse, because you have people who are going in for the first time. So it takes a few sessions to get into a Metaverse world, and each one is different. And even putting on Oculus glasses, I have to tell you, wearing VR, the first time you go in, it's okay to do it for an hour. You don't want to be in there for 3 hours, because all of a sudden you start to get sick. And if you have had, one day I ate too many cookies, Greg, before the actual meeting. I went in, and the next thing you know, I wasn't feeling so great, because you're moving around and you're using your brain in a different way. And so the adoption rate right now, because it's easier, because there's not so much to get overwhelmed with, you still need a couple of meetings. You don't want to go in with a client or a customer right away. If you're doing anything in any industry, you want to spend some time with your team getting orientated and using VR. And then there was a second part to that question, I think, Greg, which was?
Realistically, so as a financial advisory firm, what could they do in the Metaverse? What would be an interesting way for them to get started?
Yeah, I think I love the financial industry from the standpoint of educating people, right, on investments, and how you could do a lot of role playing on, here's a situation that happens as a family, get everyone together, and a real financial situation happens. How many times have we said to ourselves, I wish we taught our kids, or I wish I taught myself how to be a better financial planner? Mm-hmm. And the financial planning actually happens during crisis, right? Where something happens to the house, or to, something else from a financial standpoint. And you can go through like the top 5 things that happen, right? And so if you actually could role play those, and you could role play that with your customer, well, what better way to teach somebody how to, and the things I'm thinking about, because they're not all rose colored ones, but, death in the family, divorce, family planning for education, family planning for something like, all of a sudden, somebody gets into a car accident, the car is totaled. How do you deal with that as a family right after? Like, these are things that a financial planner could explain. Hey, these are the things you need to be prepared for. I hope that helps. Those are just ones I'm coming off the top of my head. So
no, that's a fantastic idea. So I think that idea of, and I'm going to go back to when I was a kid. I remember there was a game on the Apple way back when. I forget exactly what it was called, but you had a cold drink stand, and you had to a lemonade stand. It might be, so you took the lemons and you made lemonade, and you had to sell it, and you managed a budget, and you're kind of learning as you're playing. So you could almost imagine some sort of strange metaverse version of that this financial advisory firm could get out there, again, as a game, to do some role playing in a fun way, but where in the background you're actually teaching your prospective clients a few things that they need to think about, and then again getting some potential new clients come through the door. So
even using credit cards, Greg. I mean, how many of us were taught how do you use a credit card and what decisions do you make, right? So that's an amazing one where I'm sure a lot of people would love their kids an ability to understand how credit works and how it impacts your credit rating. Well, there's nothing better than having the family sit together and say this impact. There's a book I read too, AI 2041, and one of the first stories in it talks about how the insurance premium was impacted by the decisions that the family made, and the parents were monitoring their kids. And I'm going to, again, I don't want to go to all the negative stuff, but like things that your family would do would impact your insurance premium because you're being tracked on your watch. Yeah. And on your usage on the internet. And so those things all combine to say, here's what your insurance premium could be. So even think of those kind of concepts as well in the future.
So I always thought we were going to struggle to finish or close the show off today because we would not run out of things to talk about. But those were some great questions. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for this week. So Sharon, as my guest, thank you very much for helping us navigate around the concept of a metaverse. There's certainly much more to unpack on the story, and the state of the art is developing pretty rapidly. So would love to have you join us for a future show. I definitely think we need to put a poll out there to see who would be up for joining us in a metaverse experience for that show. It would be suitable. But thank you so much for joining us today, Sharon. To the audience, it's been great having you with us in the Sandbox on this journey to the metaverse. You can keep an eye on our Innovation Sandbox calendar for more episodes in the series. Until then, goodbye, keep well, keep innovating, and we'll see you all next time.